Welcome to Wednesday Q&A, where you all ask the questions and we answer. I'm joined by Kristen Williams, my favorite physical therapist, senior lit teacher extraordinaire, and beautiful friend. Hello.
Hello, Laura, and I'm with my favorite physical therapist, fearless leader.
Works out well, works
That's
out
right.
well. Yay.
From another
So,
mister, all those good things.
yes, sister from another mister. Indeed. And we're matching more
Yeah,
core, always more core,
always.
more core. So Susan T asked us, for you and Kristen, I would like to hear from you both. How do you feel like you move better now, being older than you did when you were younger? Or are there any ways that you feel that you're moving differently?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that and I've even seen this in my evolution from being my first few classes on Lit Daily till now, doing all the teacher training, really answering questions, demonstrating. As a physical therapist, I had a big step up over other people going through the Lit training X number of years ago. The anatomy knowledge was great, but I still wasn't moving with I could move my body well, but I wasn't totally tuned into my core. That wasn't my focus. I was just a runner. I'd never done yoga. And I've really watched, somebody just reached out to me maybe 3 weeks ago, and she was doing my sequencing 101 lab, and she sent a little video clip of me when I used to, inhale up, exhale, forward, fold. I would do this weird, like, thrust of my ribs, and I never felt it. And I remember seeing that going, what am I doing? And since then, I don't do it because, again, that's the beauty of watching yourself practice. You can see things that you can't feel in your body. So I am much more aware of where I am in space. I've always been concerned with biomechanics by way of my peripheral joints, trying to keep them safe. But now I'm more focused on my proximal body. Um, I've always had good posture. I've always, really thought about ears over shoulders, but much less about my pelvis. So I think that I move better. I move, again, with more of an intelligence, and I'm moving in much more ranges of motion. Lit daily alone. Lit alone. I remember my husband, we were talking about, why he loves it so much. He's an athlete. He played basketball, played baseball. Come on, Kristen. Basketball and baseball. And, lifted weights. He ran with me, started lit, and, it really lights up the entire body. And that was his explanation was, man, I am moving. He used to come down the stairs grunting. It was like, he was like Frankenstein, every step hurt for the first few, and then he would loosen up. After practicing lit for several months, he was like, yada, da, getting up in the morning because we're moving in full ranges. We're getting those soft tissues lengthened and getting them prepared to lengthen against tension. So I just think I move better. I move more sustainably and just with more intelligence since starting teaching lit teachers to teach lit. It's all been a growth and I continue to grow. I continue to learn. That's why I love my sequencing lab calls, because we just are sharing. I'm sharing with teachers all over the world about movement, and they turn into just these powwows, as opposed to me just telling my knowledge. I'm learning from them. So it is such a great community that this online platform has allowed for my movement, as well as others. So that's my answer. How about you, Laura?
Well, I love your answer and I agree with it a lot because I feel like I even look back at some of my stuff from 5 years ago and there's things that I see that, just other people might not notice, but I feel like I have refined my movement. And compared to like my early years, I actually have, I wake up and I feel great, as sometimes when I was running a lot and doing some yoga and doing some spinning, I did have like kind of almost like a chronic soreness, and it wasn't anything I noticed that was bad because I was healthy and young, but I look back and I think, I wasn't as balanced. And I think that's really the key to aging well. And that's what I do notice is that making these refinements over the years has led to where I am now, where at 52, I do wake up and I feel great. I don't feel like, my back or my hip or, anything that I did have sometimes when I was younger and I wasn't as refined in my movement. I wasn't as balanced in my movement. So I'm just like you, I'm grateful I had a starting place. If I've always had good posture, I had the biomechanical awareness, but even with that, I didn't have as great of a overall balance to my joint mobility, to my core strength. Yeah, I mean, core strength has changed tremendously. And I would say that is fundamental for feeling great now, because I was doing a lot of things. I was moving a lot, but I don't think I was moving with that deep core engagement. And that's where I probably would feel sometimes like aches in my back or in my glutes or something. It would fade like Tim, as I got up and got moving. But that's a really good kind of measure. It's like, how do you feel when you get up in the morning? Shy of having like a suboptimal mattress or something. If you feel like you get up and your body feels refreshed and good and not like tight, contracted, painful, achy, that's a pretty good indication that you're doing the job to stay, optimally balanced. And I think that's what we're going for. And in terms of my movement, I was saying this to the teacher trainees, like, even though my practice looks quote unquote advanced, it's actually it feels easy to me. Like, it takes a lot for me now to really feel like exhausted or super sweaty and I really attribute that to that balance and efficiency, because then you move through space and you aren't, people are working a lot harder than I am because I'm just more efficient. I often say I'm not necessarily stronger than other people, but I'm just much more efficient. And I think that efficiency has really manifested to where I am now versus, I don't think, I know I wasn't as efficient when I was younger.
Yep. Great question.
Yeah, really good. Okay, she's asking about, what do you think of wheel on the wall, where you walk the hands along the wall and drop down to touch the chest to the wall?
Oof.
So yeah, so I think a lot of people are, and you're probably seeing that, I think in some areas, I want to say, of the world, there's still got a lot of this kind of classical traditional practices. And that's one of them, as a way of experiencing what a drop back would be. So my answer to that is, I think it would be fine for a very small percentage of people. And I think it would not be good for a large percentage of people. And that the reason being is, you're asking for, going back to this idea of balance, you're asking for a balanced extension of the spine. And what that means is all the segments are equally participating as best as possible to create this balanced extension. And so right from the get-go, most people are not in a neutral pelvis to establish that, because the pelvis is the bowl, the spine comes out of that. And so if the pelvis is imbalanced, you're absolutely not going to get a symmetrical back bend. And that's what people do, is in the effort to go back in space, they tip the pelvis, and then that scrunches the low back. And then you walk down the wall, and then you're really compressing into that low back more. So this takes an incredible amount of preparation. And to what end? Like why do we want to do that? I'm not really sure. I think it's like, again, something that's taught as an option for preparing your body for a drop back, which is smart. So you don't just go right back onto your hands, but you're really relying on 2 feet on the ground, and then your spine is not supported as you walk your arms down, PS getting in range of shoulder flexion, which people don't often have either. So I would say, I always ask, why would we do that? Is it that you want to experience wheel and you want to go down that way and get really into your wheel? I just think that I would stick to just being in wheel and really enjoying that, because a lot of people, again, can't even get into wheel and with that uniform spinal extension. Any comments on that?
No, I was just kind of laughing because if you happen to be watching the YouTube version of this, you would have seen my facial expression, which was yeah, you were reading the question. I was like, ugh, cringe, because to your point, Laura, most people cannot do that safely. And even the people that can do it, because of the way our spine is made, so we're looking for the universal curve, but the reality is the thoracic spine is attached to the rib cage. It can only extend so much. We get the most extension from our neck and our lumbar spine. And in a wheel, period, if you don't have really good shoulder extension or flexion, which means super open lats, super open, armpits, axilla, really open low back connective tissue to get into that, to create more of a balanced curve, it's going to go into your low back. And to be fair, a lot of, gymnast preparation, I think of my daughter is a high level cheerleader, and I've seen gymnasts do this where they are coming into a bridge and then trying to push the legs straight. So they're really, trying to go into that and lengthen out the low back, which is it's a ton on an area that really cannot extend that much. So you're going to go elsewhere. And for most people, it'll be in the shoulders and in that low back. Two areas that are the shoulders especially are very, very, because they're so mobile, they're susceptible to injury. And then the low back, because it just takes the brunt of everything we do, hugely susceptible to injury. I feel the same way as you, Laura. To what end? Why are we doing this? And I always just, can you do it? A small percentage of people, sure, they can do it fine. Can they do it well? I would argue even smaller percentage of people. And should we do it? Is, again, I'm not here to tell you that you should or shouldn't do anything. We're grown ass adults. That's what I always say. When I'm teaching teachers, they're like, well, shouldn't we correct everything somebody does? And I'm like, lead by example. People are grown adults. They can make their own decisions. So if you want to do that, that is your choice. Just educate them as to what the possible outcome is. So wheel period, but especially that approach where I think as you're walking down, most people are going to be asking themselves to go into a deeper wheel than if you come from a supine position and press up, because you're walking down on purpose, I think, to get into a more bent up wheel. And so again, to what end? Is it just because someone told you to do it, or that's my question for it all.
Yeah. And again, I think, like, we don't want to talk in a inflammatory way, but you can walk down into a wheel and not have enough shoulder flexion, but you can kind of fake it because you're kind of getting into the entry. You don't have to push against gravity like you do in regular wheel. So it's actually a lot harder to work it from the ground up, but it's also true. Like if you don't have that range and the strength in that range, you'll just end up on, like maybe balancing on your head. You won't be able to get all the way up. So those people, the last thing they should be doing is walking down into it and getting into it and then trying to access that range and strength in that range when they haven't been able to do it already against gravity. So again, it is a small percentage of people who might try it, but it always goes back to the why. And this is where yoga, I think, is where we want to be such positive, mouthpieces for yoga, that it is not a performative gymnastics, contortionist, in-range motion, bam, bam, bam type of movement practice. It's intentional. It's paying attention. It's asking the why. It's honoring our bodies and honoring that movement is like life. And we want to move with this fluidity and strength. And I think paying attention to transitions is way more important and impactful than getting into like really advanced quote unquote poses. But that's me.
I know, that's what I think our age does impact this opinion.
Yeah, because we're just not I'm just not going to do something that again, I always look at, we always look at cost benefit. Like, what is the benefit and what is the cost? And if there is some benefit, how can I get that benefit somewhere else in a safer and a more sustainable way? Because almost every pose that you might reap some benefit, it's like shoulder stand. People say, oh, that feels so great for my back. Well, you're stretching your back fascia, but let's do it in a much more impactful way that isn't going to, scrunch your cervical spine, etc. And that's why we have things like the happy squat. We're really fulfilling that. People like the feeling of opening up their hips in a wheel. Well, how else can you get that feeling, that craving, satisfying? And maybe it's that you don't have to go into deep range to get it. You just have to actually stabilize the pelvis more. All right. Nairi, our wonderful Nairi. This is a really beautiful question. She was wondering if we could talk about this on the podcast. The topic is emotional trauma and how that affects our body. Her mom died last year, and it's definitely changed how strong I am physically. And I know I'm coping okay. And apart from the sadness, I've had a really good year teaching and lots to be positive about. I'm listening to your brain podcast. I'm definitely more of I can do this type person. I've always got through challenge and have a positive outlook, but it's more like something has physically changed. The first time I moved, I was like Bambi on ice and was, where is it? Hold on, I had to screenshot this. And was completely shocked. I still love my practice. It's a year on and my strength's still a bit lost. That's the only way to describe it. Like I physically lost something and I've searched but can't find it. I know I will, so I'm definitely not giving up. And I know this will be a brain nervous system thing. The body keeps the score, etc. You're super clever, so I know you'll probably have an idea. And she thought this might be helpful because lots of people are going through things like recovery, physically, emotionally, grief, and all that stuff. So first of all, Nairi, as we've messaged back and forth, I hear you, I feel you, and I know it. Unfortunately, I know it so well. Grief is, I say it's a motherfucker. I mean, it is a weight that you carry, and you can put it down briefly, but then you have to pick it back up, and it does change, but it also changes you. So I would say, just like you're doing, be really tender, be very, caring for yourself. Realize that the physical weight of grief has made you feel weaker, and that is, that happens, and it happens to so many. I don't even kind of know how I got through the first few months after my dad died. I just don't know, because I didn't want to get up. So I think it's really important to know our bodies are carrying and reflecting our heart and our emotions. And I would just honor that. And, when things come up, cry, breathe, get angry, all of the things that you need to part of the process. So I know for me, I was able to get back to my practice. My practice for me was my healing and my coming back to, myself. But I do know that in that, and in other ways, I've carried that weight of my dad. And you're still, a year in, it's still super fresh. I'm 3 years in, and it still feels like I could cry at any minute about it. Our body does keep the score. So I think the best thing to do is know you will feel stronger again, as some of that heaviness that you're carrying is lightened. I was talking to a friend of mine who lost a child, and she's like, it's a package, it's a weight I can't ever put down. So I think it does get lighter with time. And then strengthening and fortifying your body will also ease the weight of the grief. That totally has been true for me. But just knowing that there are going to be harder days and not harder days. And I remember early on, probably about the stage you are now, maybe 9 months in, I was visiting my home, my childhood home, and I just felt the loss so viscerally. And like I had put out my mat and I just got in a child's pose, and I had to just be there for like 20 minutes. And then I moved, but it felt like a little bit of that exhaustion you're talking about. I still moved a little bit. I just didn't move, I moved to the edges of it, to what I could tolerate. So I think it's just important, and I'm so glad you brought this up, that it is something that everyone feels in some way. and just ride it, but don't ignore it, and just be really tender and know that time does help for sure. You're still early on, and um, it's processing the loss, because it's something I don't think we can ever wrap our head around the loss of someone we love so much, because it's like they're no longer there, and that's just, it's almost intolerable.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have that experience, thankfully. I haven't lost a parent. Um, but I think there are people who've had other types of losses who can relate as well. Um, certainly a loss of innocence, you can carry that very far. Sexual abuse, sexual trauma. We have loss of physical body, where people have been in an accident. I've worked with spinal cord injured patients. There's a grief when we lose people who are in pain. They lose the ability to move the way they once did. Um, that is also heavily carried by the body. And I love how you pointed out, when you were in the deepest of your grief, you were tender and kind to yourself. Because we talk about this a lot, how, really being able to move well requires thought. And when you're distracted, it can be hard to move well. And I think that's why Nairi was feeling like a Bambi,
Mm-hmm.
because she was distracted. And we always talk about the importance of moving with intention. And so when you're in the process of a loss of whatever it might not be a person. It can be, there's a whole range of grief that we
A
can carry.
divorce, all kinds of things, a loss
Relation.
of, like, as parents, when our children leave, we've talked about this, between us, but, when both of our daughters went to college, we had prepared so much, but you can't prepare. And then it is such a massive hole.
Yeah.
And you just have to metabolize it little by little and work through it, but just really honor that loss and give yourself the space and tenderness.
Yeah. And then, eventually, like you said, time does, but it's never gonna leave. I think it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be a burden that you carry, but the burden lightens with
Mm-hmm.
time, and it comes back and then it goes away, and it comes back and it goes away. And we find other ways to move better and bring joy to our heart,
Yeah.
that can help. And a good movement practice, as Nairi knows, she says she's having great, she's had a great teaching, but I think self compassion and kindness is key.
It is key. It is absolutely key. And, again, movement for the most part it's healed me. It's healed so much of that grief. And, but it can be in different forms. It could be walking in the woods. For me, being on the mat reminds me of my dad, because he loved to watch me practice. So there is a connection there that fuels me. But maybe for you, if there's something that your mom loved doing, like being out in the garden, or kind of connecting with her through your body, through your heart and love, um, that can be really healing as well. So know that we are sending you such love, and, keep feeling it, keep grieving, and really let the movement and let this community be any kind of solve for your heart pain.
We love you,
Well,
Lynn.
yeah, as always, everybody, we love you. We love this community. As you can see, we'll talk about anything. So please write us and send us your questions. We don't necessarily have the answers. We're just giving you opinions and life experiences more than anything. So we hope you are appreciating us sharing that. So you can always find us on Instagram. I'm Lara.Hyman, and KB is KB Williams 99.
Thank you.
Thank you. I love you. And
Love
we
you
love
too.
all of you. As always, we're pulling for you.